Connecting to cloud. Okay, all right, fantastic. So here we are. This is time for some Wednesday wellness, a chance for you to ask your questions and get them answered. If you sent them in beforehand, I will be answering not all of them this week, because we've got a lot of topics and I have some things to get to next. So the big questions I've been asked about POTS, not pots and pans, but postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which is a basic, and when you have something with the end of syndrome, it basically means there's a collection of symptoms. We don't know what causes it. We're going to stick it all together. Perimenopause and cluster headaches. So I'm actually going to start with the cluster headaches, because well, headaches generally, the major cause of ordinary headaches, sort of tension headaches and all these things like that, is nearly always related to the neck in some way, the neck joints or the neck muscles. And so most headaches, if you're getting recurrent headaches, if you see a chiropractor, an osteopath, a massage therapist, you'll probably be surprised at how much better your headaches will be once you have a little bit of care to the neck, basically. But then you've got migraines, and that can be, again, it can come from the neck. It can come from what you're eating and food sensitivities, nutritional deficiencies, toxicities. And they can take, they're usually more complicated than ordinary headaches. But then you get cluster headaches. Now, cluster headaches are just the worst, basically. It's basically, because I've had a few patients with cluster headaches, and it's basically, it's almost like having drills or spikes in the side of your head. They're the most painful headaches, apparently, and they're probably one of the most painful conditions that you can have. Outranks pretty much anything. And it's usually, it's called cluster because you tend to get clusters of these headaches together, and then you can be fine for months, years even, and then you get a cluster together. But the other thing about them is you get clusters of like searing pain, with burning pain, stabbing pain, drilling pain, tearing pain. It's just terrible pain, and like there's multiple points, and it's usually just on one side of the head, and it's always the same side, and it's often accompanied with some kind of tearing, as in tears, red eye, maybe sinusy issues as well. And so it might be linked with the sinus, it might be linked with an inflammatory reaction in the membranes, but there's no real clear understanding of what is actually causing the migraine, the cluster headaches. But what we do know is that the more stress people are under, the more nutritionally deficient they are, the more toxic they are, and the more bad habits they have, the more likely these things are to actually be recurring. And the other thing about cluster headaches is, for a lot of people, they happen at the same time every day, and it can very often be at night as well, so a couple of hours after going to bed. So there's some thoughts that it's to do with the hypothalamus and what's called our circadian rhythm. And now, what I generally recommend, if someone does come to me with cluster headaches, which isn't very many people over the years, I think I've only seen 2 people, and neither of them came to me because of the cluster headaches. They came to me for other reasons. So my overall recommendations now are, look, if you've got these headaches, you want to have a look at the whole of your magnificent 7. You want to look at your, are you thinking well? What's your stress levels? Are you resilient? Okay, are you eating everything properly? Is your internal communication systems working? So are you loaded with the right nutrients? Is your nervous system working properly? Are you detoxing properly? Are you exercising enough? Are you exercising too much? What are all the forms of stress on your system? What can you do to lower the stress on your system? When it comes to actually sort of treating the pain directly, then pretty much it's drugs. But you can, again, if you're doing all the right underlying things, you may have them less severely, or they may happen less often. And there is some thoughts on the way of vagal nerve stimulation. Now, the vagus nerve is basically the connection between the brain and all your internal organs. And because this seems to be related to mucous membranes and circadian rhythm, then maybe looking after the most important nerve in the body, vagus nerve, would have an effect. And it does seem to be, and you can get vagal nerve stimulators. So that then brings me on to the next issue, which is again vaguely related through the vagus nerve, possibly, and that's POTS, so postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which is basically your heart and your arterial system not coping with changes in posture. And so whether that then causes a racing heart or a drop in blood pressure, causes dizziness when you sort of from lying down, standing up, blood pressure doesn't change appropriately. And there's a range of different symptoms. And just like all headaches, okay, there is a number of underlying causes. It can be because you have too much adrenaline, or it can be you're not creating enough adrenaline. Again, it can be related to the vagus nerve, because the vagus nerve is the communication between your brain and your heart, and therefore also blood pressure in a lot of ways as well. So there can be nutritional deficiencies and toxicities and stresses on the system again. But one of the thoughts is that a lot of it is to do with what's called your limbic system, which is basically your unconscious control of things like your vagus nerve and emotions, and how it's all sort of interplayed together. So there's something, what's it called? Dynamic neural retraining. I'll put a link to it below the video on Facebook anyway. Well, actually, I made a note of it actually, because I can never remember the name of it. It's retrainingthebrain.com. Yeah, retrainingthebrain.com. And that's it's a 6-month course on helping to retrain your limbic system, which can be really useful for a lot of chronic conditions. Whether it's chronic fatigue, ME, these sorts of things, because a lot of people, their chronic fatigue is all wired up with what's happening in the brain. And so you can get nutrition sorted and you can try and exercise, but it's the wiring in the brain literally needs to be rewired, which can only be done by practicing the right things repetitively. Likewise, a lot of people with chronic fatigue and POTS, etc., they try all the mental, emotional stuff, talking stuff, but it's because they've got some other problem. That's the problem. And one of those big problems that can cause an issue with everybody, whether you're a man or a woman, is excess estrogen dominance. And some functional medical doctors find that estrogen dominance is actually the cause of POTS, which perhaps explains why it may happen more in women than men. Because they're more likely to be estrogen dominant. Because yes, men can have estrogen in them too from all the environmental toxins. If you've ever eaten wheat, you would have had glyphosate, which is a hormone disruptor, and you would have had atrazine, which basically, when given to male frogs, basically allows them to have babies because it turns them into women. So yeah, so atrazine and glyphosate are two nasty, nasty herbicides. Atrazine might be a pesticide as well, actually. Not sure what atrazine is, but it's used for spraying on plants to either get rid of bugs or weeds. And it's absolutely horrific for us human beings. So estrogen dominance, and so the way to basically clear estrogens from your system is change what foods you're eating, and then also do a detox to basically get the estrogens out of the system, the xenoestrogens, as it were. Which brings me now to a bit of a slide share, which brings me to perimenopause, because strangely enough, half of my patients, being females, are either going to have this problem or may have this problem soon. Let's see, so share a screen. So perimenopause, basically, menopause, often people say, with doctors, we say this, I'm not a doctor, I'm a functional healthcare specialist, but whether it's a doctor or a person, often when they go through the change, when they start getting hot flashes, their menstruation starts going a bit doolally, they're going through that age, and it gets called, I'm going through the menopause. But actually, technically, menopause is basically after everything stopped, and you haven't had a menstruation for at least 12 months. Okay, and that's after. Perimenopause is actually going through that phase that often gets just called menopause. So menopause is something where you are once you've been through perimenopause. And perimenopause is basically brought about by a decline in female hormones. And nearly everyone thinks about estrogen first, but there's a second hormone called progesterone. And a lot of the symptoms actually come about from the fact that progesterone is falling faster than estrogen, mainly because we are getting so many xenoestrogens in our diet that basically the progesterone dips faster than the estrogen, even though the estrogen is dipping. And the thing about estrogen is if you raise the estrogen up, it can pretty much block all symptoms and make you feel better, regardless of where the progesterone is and whether or not you're actually fixing the underlying causes. So here is a look at the underlying causes of symptoms in the perimenopause, because perimenopause is a natural process. So share screen, here we go, share, and let's, so hopefully you can see this at the center of my screen now. Basically perimenopause, the things that are related to it: sex hormones, stress hormones, thyroid health, bone density, mitochondrial energy, sleep problems, blood sugar balance, cardiovascular health, neurological health, liver detoxification, gut microbiome, and emotional well-being, and how that all interplays with your environment and your genetics. So when it comes to, I'll just call it the menopause, it's not just about treating the sex hormones. It's actually about looking at all these other interplaying parts, okay, and actually trying to tick, okay, which is the one, where do we need to focus on to actually get this all balanced? What do we need to test for as well? It's pretty complicated, basically. And so, yes, we have protocols here to actually help with that. We have perimenopausal program, a specific set of supplements, but then depending on what else is going on, we bolt on other things to it, whether that's lifestyle management, so whether it's stress management, healthy mindset program, which is an online training program we have, whether it's actually using an app to help with the brain and the stress, whether it's nutrients, looking at your diet, looking at your exercise, looking at your environment as well. And testing can play a big part as well to find out what are the specific things that need to be fixed once you've done the basics. So I hope that has been useful. If you are someone suffering with ordinary headaches, then please reach out. If you do want some help with cluster migraines, I'll certainly talk cluster headaches. I will talk to you and we'll figure out whether or not there's a possibility that I can help. But again, if you are menopausal or perimenopausal, or the best thing to do is to actually prepare for it before it happens, to decrease the likelihood of any symptoms. So the best time for me to help you with the perimenopause is before it happens. So if you want to start sort of getting yourself sort of cleared out of extra estrogens, making sure that everything's in balance, then reach out. That's why I'm called Body in Balance. And one of the things I'd recommend you have is the EFA balance test, looking at fatty acids, because all your hormones are made from fats. And yeah, the second best time to help you is when you're going through it. So please, if you are having menopausal issues and symptoms and you're looking for someone that can actually look at the whole picture, and you're okay with a man helping you, then I am here to help. So thank you very, very much for watching, and I will speak to you all soon. Be well. Oh, by the way, just in case you're watching this on YouTube, it's bodyinbalanceuk.com, and phone number is 01 707 662 704. Be well, be magnificently well. Bye for now.